As a salesperson, you want to be comfortably uncomfortable.
You probably do this very naturally, is the ability to simplify the complex.
You hit the nail on the head. They're all managed differently, and it's a lot to get to know the different personalities because it doesn't all work. It doesn't fit in one box.
Welcome to Building Your Sales Engine. I'm your host, Mark McGraw. In this episode of Building Your Sales Engine with Mark McGraw, I interviewed Dan Ford. Dan is the director of AV at Basesix. It's an AV company, so they do all the technology around conferences and access control and the like. And what's cool about Dan's story and what to be looking for is his journey. You know, when he got into Sandler, 15 years, he'll tell you, 15 years ago, his journey, his progression has gone from being a tech to a salesperson to a sales manager, now a business owner, which is so cool. And we hear this story over and over in the interviews that we have with people about how they've progressed through their career and ended up doing some really cool things. He talks about culture. He talks about building up his team, some great interview questions for sure inside of there, and mentorship and the importance of being able to develop your team and grow the people around you, which is one of the most inspirational pieces of management and leadership. I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. Let's bring in and introduce Dan Ford. So welcome to Building Your Sales Engine. I am your host, Mark McGraw. I'm here with Dan Ford, who is with Basesix and longtime big fan of Sandler. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation because you, like many other people that we've interviewed and talked with, have been on this journey of your career and what you've done and how you've built up from different roles. Dan, welcome to the show and talk to us. Tell us a little bit about your history and your background.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here. Appreciate the invite. And as you mentioned, yes, it's been quite the journey. I started out as an installation technician for a company in Florida. My boss tried to scare me away by offering me that position. I told him I wanted to be in sales, and he said, "Yeah, I'll put you in sales." So I called him and called him and called him, and he never called me back. And as he tells the story to his partners, he went down to his partners and said, "I think I screwed up. I offered this kid a position in sales, and now he won't stop calling me." So his partners, as they said it, they said, "Well, scare him off. Tell him he needs to move from Georgia to Florida and go through the install program and learn it all from the ground floor up and move away from his family and friends, and he'll go away." Well, he told me that, and I said, "I'm in. I want to do that." So
it worked the opposite way.
It worked the opposite.
Negative reversing from Sandler right
That's
there.
right. Yes. That's exactly right.
Exactly. So you can't have this and you want it more.
But that's right.
What were you installing?
Audiovisual products.
Okay.
So my first day, I didn't even know how to spell projector.
Didn't know how to spell AV?
Yeah, that was tough too. Yeah.
We've all been there.
But I had great mentors down there, and I learned the install program from the insides and out, moved back to Georgia. The rest is kind of history, worked my way up through project management. He eventually did honor his word and put me in sales. At that point, I was still young. I was probably 23-ish, and we thought it was a good idea to look into going through the Sandler program, which is what I did at that time. That gave me a great foundation and a lot of skills that I could set forth in the sales industry, work my way up through the sales industry. I was in sales for about 11 years. I'm still in sales technically, but now I lead an audiovisual group at a company called Basesix.
Yeah, and you're now a part owner, is that true?
I am, yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I love to hear that story. I love to hear the progression of people. What's one thing that's interesting to me is that you knew you wanted to be in sales, and not a lot of people. It seems like they do the technical side first and they fall into sales. But you, like me, you knew you wanted to be in sales. What was it about selling that just attracted you into that side? Because again, a lot of people have preconceived notions of that aren't positive.
Good point. And there's a lot of pressure in sales, right? You're only as good as your last sale. And when the year ends, the clock starts over, and there's a lot of pressure. I learned that I wanted to be in sales actually well before I was in audiovisual. So I was 17 or 18 years old, and I worked at this is going to age myself, but I worked at a shoe store back when they used to have brick and mortar shoe stores called the Sports Shoe. And I became passionate about shoes. I learned the technology, and we used to have sales contests at the shoe store, and I won a lot of months, very many months I won. And I realized I'm good at this, but I'm selling things that cost, $120. What if I could sell things that cost thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars? So that kind of got me on the trajectory of, I kind of think sales is a good fit for me. So when they told me I had to go through the install program, immediately I was somewhat crushed. I thought that would be sort of a setback, but in retrospect, my boss had a lot of wisdom in doing that, because in a technology space, learning it from that ground floor up and actually installing these items and learning about the technology and learning how to be able to talk about the technology to customers who may or may not be tech savvy, right? Mm-hmm. That allowed me to, as a salesperson with my sales hat, I could talk to a CEO or a CFO and put the technology in layman's terms for them to understand. This is how the room's going to work. That's all you care about, right? It's how it's going to function. I don't want it to fail, but it's not getting super techie and down in the weeds. But the install side allowed me to have that techie talk with the IT guys if I needed to, because they want to know the ins and the outs of the equipment. What does a DSP do? What does this do? What does that do? What does a switcher do? So I was able to kind of talk on both sides. So looking back on it, it was actually a blessing that they put me through install so I could learn that side of it as well.
And knowing who you're talking to and shaping the conversation to that person, so important in our profession and what we do. And one of the things that I see, and you probably do this very naturally, is the ability to simplify the complex. I mean, to me, that's one of the best characteristics of really the best salespeople, especially in technology.
It does.
You see the same?
Yes, it changes a lot, but it's all relatively the same, right? There's a different way of doing it. There's a better way of doing it, but it still is doing the same thing. But 100%, you have to be able to do that if you're going to be a successful salesperson. You have to know your industry, whether that be technology, whether that be cars, you name it. You have to have a sense of knowledge about what you're selling so you can answer the questions without getting too deep. And by the way, that's been strategic in how I hire folks too. Specifically as it relates to our engineering team. As we all know, engineers, they tick a certain way, or they can tick a certain way, I should say. And having an engineer that you can also put in front of a customer without putting them to sleep, but also be able to speak kind of at a salesy level to them so they can understand the functionality is also super important. So I've been intentional about my hiring practices as well.
So I'm curious, how do you test that? Just as a side note for it, how do you evaluate that when you're interviewing somebody to know how much detail they'll go into?
Good question. So what I've done with engineers, and this is probably different across different industries, but I've asked them, I'll send them a drawing of maybe a project that we've done in the past, and I'll ask them to take a day or so and look at it and get to know the technology, and then we set up like a mock meeting where I'm the customer and I have all these questions about, okay, I see this drawing, I see all these lines and wiring diagram. I don't know what it means. Can you help me understand how this room is going to work? And I see how they do.
It's a great way to go at it, and that's to test people in the interview process for something that you do. In our business, Dan, we one of the things that we do, and maybe folks can get something out of this that for sure is that we have people train the upfront contract. And so we give them a video that's a 15-minute video on the concepts, and then they come in and present. And since it's the same topic each time, you get to see and evaluate person A to B and C. And, it's a
Very
great
similar
method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I typically use the same project for all of my guys.
Smart. You got a baseline for it. So it's really good that you're testing people as you come in, as they come in, as to whether or not they're tall enough to ride the ride, so to speak, and they can do that.
It is. It's that, and it's also, are they going to fit the culture, right? We have built something pretty special at Basesix. I was employee number 4 So we sat around a table with our founder, the four of us, and we kind of looked at each other and we said, well, what do we do now? We're all here. But we've grown it. I guess this June will be the start of my 7th year at Basesix, and we've grown exponentially over the past 7 years to 4 offices, just under 200 employees. We were $80 million in revenue last year. So we've
in 7 years.
Yeah, we've grown really. We've been lucky. But my point is, a lot of that has to do with the culture and the founders and what they envisioned our culture being. They tried that at a previous company and it worked until they got so big and they sold it and we merged. And quite frankly, they grew so fast that they put people in seats because they needed to, but they didn't do the due diligence of putting the right people in those seats. And that's what we've been blessed with, is the ability to do that. When I speak about an engineer, I interviewed probably a half a dozen engineers before I finally settled on the team that I have now. And by settled, I'd say settled on. That's not a fair way to put it. I was delighted when I finally had this interview with my senior design engineers, because I'm like, it was within 10 minutes of the phone call. I went into my CFO's office. I said, I got to have this guy. This guy is going to fit the culture. He checked all the boxes technically, and so did the previous 6. But there was just something about, are they going to fit the culture? Can I put them, yes, they know their stuff. Can I put them in front of a customer, though, and trust that if I'm not there at the meeting, that it's going to go just as smoothly and the customer's going to come back and say, what a great experience I had with your engineer. And this guy was the guy. And I said, I just knew it. And we've been very successful with him since.
Dan, how would you define the culture? Because, I mean, as a sales leader and managing a sales team, for sure, that's an important ingredient, and you got to get that right, for sure. How would you define it, and how did you get there?
Our culture, in one word, is fun. It's fun. People love coming to work. At the old company, or one of my previous companies, I got to the point after the culture was kind of crushed. I would come home, and my wife looked at me and she said, you need to be looking for a new job. We need Danny back in this house. And that was telling to me, because I was taking it home with me. And now at my house, I take it home with me too, but now she's probably tired of me telling, stories. Listen to what happened today at work. We have so much fun. We look forward to going into the office. On Mondays during football season, we have Alabama fans, Georgia fans, Auburn fans, and we all just give each other grief in a fun way. We all have each other's backs. We trust each other. If I have, if say for instance, if my engineer says, "Hey, I'm going on PTO for the next week and a half," we have people in place that says, "Go on PTO. Don't check your phone. Well, check your phone occasionally, but don't have it tied to you the whole time. Enjoy your time with your family. We got you." That's important, but mostly it's trust. And fun. We just created an environment where people like to come in and work. And I think that that's just super important.
It makes, you spend half your day, half your life at least, at work. You might as well enjoy the people that you're around and the
That's
experience
exactly right.
that you're having. By the way, that goes with customers too. If I don't know that you run into this. We generally don't, but man, it's terrible when you have a culture of fun and you get a customer that doesn't have that. It's just not a good fit. It's miserable.
We've actually intentionally walked away from some customers that are like that. It's too much of a headache. They're a grind. Nothing you do seems to satisfy them. And no matter what was discussed pre-sales, what you deliver, they have short memories. Well, you didn't tell us that. You said it was going to do this. It's like, well, hold on a second. We've had 15 different meetings with you, and you refined the budget, but that took away functionality in the systems, and now you're not happy with the functionality in the systems. And when you remind them of that, it's somehow your fault. And that's not a good feeling, and it's not a good position to put our installers in, is they're the guys. We tell our install team, when you are out on a job site, you are the face of Basesix. The sales process is behind us now. The engineering process and all those meetings is behind us now. Now we implement, and you are the salespeople. You are the face of Basesix when you're out there. And it's not fair to them when we've set them up for success, as far as we know, but the customer is, no matter what happens, just going to be negative. So we've intentionally walked away from customers like that. It's not worth it.
And I think, as sellers go out and qualify, they can use that as a part of their qualification process. In Sandler, we refer to it as the psychographics. So if you got an ideal client profile, you look at the geographically where they are, demographics, size of the company,
Sure.
all that stuff. But the thing that people miss is the psychographics, and the psychographics is the mindset. Or do they view you as a partner, or do they view you as a vendor?
Great point.
And please.
Great point. No, and our goal, and then we tell these goals to new customers or potential new customers, is we're probably not going to be the cheapest that you're going to find out on the market, right? There's AV companies that are a two-man show that underbid things just so they can get the business. That's not us. We're also probably not going to be the most expensive. We're going to be in the middle, but we're going to be a partner for you. And that is what we want. We want, when you say, hey, we're expanding our office and we're adding 2 more floors to it in downtown Atlanta, we want your first thought is, we need to call the Basesix team. We need to get them in here to get their input. Because it's not what I teach our sellers or try to influence our sellers on, and our techs and everyone that works with us. It's not our intent. We're not trying to sell you something. I mean, yes, we are, but we are not trying to sell you something and fake you into buying something more than you need just to get the revenue from it. We want to be a partner. It's our job to show you what's in the market, what are other companies similar to your size and fashion doing in their conference rooms. We have demo rooms at our office we bring people into. We say, here's what we would recommend for your space. There's also this version of it and this version of it. We want to help work within your budget so we can be a partner for you and not have you feel like, man, they really sold us a bill of goods here. That's not our intent. And I think that's important too as a salesperson to understand that, you really want to set the table to establish a long-term relationship with these folks. So they're your go-to when they have to expand or they're referring you to somebody, a similar company. We want them to say they're a great partner. Right? And that's kind of the goal.
I hate it when somebody says vendor in a meeting with me. It just, the hair goes up on the back of my neck. I try everything to do not to just but I've said to people, I'm sure you have too, is like, look, can we pause for a moment? If you're looking for a vendor, it's not us. If you're looking for a partner, we got your back. So what are you looking for? And I think it even ties back, Dan, to the culture. If you have a culture of what you're shooting for and your customers align with the culture, now you've got everything in congruence. You're qualifying for mindset, psychographics, and it all fits nicely together. Nothing worse than have a culture of fun and then have a bunch of customers that are the opposite of that. That would be a miserable experience.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And so anyway, I like the way that you're doing that. Anything, what else do you do to reinforce that culture over time? Anything jump to your mind?
We try. So our founder, his name is Rob Borden. He started several other companies before Basesix. And he learned along the way that it's not about this eventual sale of the company. He saw that the culture was killed. And I think at least one of the 2 previous companies after they sold it, and he was on the sidelines and he watched what happened and he watched people become unhappy. His whole thought process when he started both companies, but I think what's different now is he's of the mindset, we're going to start Basesix, we're going to hire a bunch of younger generation guys and gals that are eventually going to be leading this company. And we've been very intentional. We have he likes to tell me, because at the old company I was the young guy, and he likes to tell me and remind me now, you're not the young guy anymore. You're one of the older guys. But it's been fun to hire these younger team members to watch them grow. Most of the projects we do are very high-end, multi-story, multi-million-dollar high-rises, right? Commercial spaces. And some of these superintendents that are running these projects from the general contractor's standpoint and the electrical contractor's standpoint, these guys are in their 30s. Like in their early 30s, and they're running these multi-million-dollar projects. So we've aligned and intentionally hired project managers that we can start and groom and help them learn, and eventually, and some of them now are running these big projects. But going back to your question on culture, Rob's vision is let's hire these folks maybe with not the intent to sell the company, but let's make sure that we build the culture up, and then they're inviting their friends and they're bringing people in that they know. And one of the key things, I remember Rob telling me this years ago. He said, obviously, we want to make sure your work is done and complete here, but if you're going to coach your son or daughter's baseball or softball team on a Thursday at 3:00, you need to do that. The work-life balance is very, very important, and we all work hard to make sure that our work is taken care of so that we can do that stuff. But when we do that stuff, there's never any questions asked. We have we give a lot of grace at Basesix, and we give a lot of trust at Basesix, and I don't think people take advantage of that. And so I think that building a culture that promotes things like that is very important, and Rob, his vision has been great.
That's great. Lots of lessons learned from him.
Mm-hmm.
In management and leadership. When you and I were getting started, we were talking a little bit about lessons that you learn from bosses and mentors and the like. I know, and I get your thoughts on this, but I know some of the best lessons that I ever learned I got from a boss that was terrible. And I just remember as like, okay, when I'm a manager, I'm going to not
do this. Correct.
And I think there's a lot to be learned. It's miserable to go through that experience. It's a painful lesson, but you're going to get something out of it if you track it.
Sure.
Mentors in your life, leaders, people that you've learned from, positive or negatively? And if it's negative, you can leave the names out. But
no, I've been very blessed. I had one boss, and I'll leave the name out of the company and everything. He was horrible. He would talk down to us. And he'd use a lot of expletives too. You shouldn't be effing doing this, and you're horrible. And I was, that was a short period of my life. I can tell you my biggest mentor was the guy who hired me and sent me down to Florida. And he didn't know very much about AV, but he knew how to be a mentor and help grow people. And he knew sales. His name was Fran Leach. And he knew sales, and he put me. You do know Fran.
What a great guy.
He is a great guy. And he was the one who introduced me and pushed me into the Sandler program, which I'm forever grateful for. He taught me a lot of little things, a lot of big things, but a lot of little things. And I'll give you an example. When I was very new into sales, I was a rookie, I guess, and I don't believe I had yet started the Sandler program, but I got a nasty email from a customer. And so for the first year or so, he asked me, he said, hey, just keep me copied on your emails just so I know kind of in the loop. It's not to micromanage, but he had a lot of wisdom and insight. He knew that I was going to make mistakes. So I kept him in the loop on email. So I got a nasty email from a customer. I fired an email back. And 5 minutes later, his door opens. He said, hey, can you come in here? So I went in there, and he said he had printed out the email. I said, could you read that out loud to me? So I did. And he said, how did that sound to you? And I said, that sounded very, very combative. And he goes, okay. So he said, I want to challenge you to do something. Going forward on all the emails, no matter good or bad, what I want you to do is I want you to transpose your response, and I want you to walk away from your computer for 10 or 15 minutes. Then I want you to come back, and I want you to read it. And chances are you're probably going to change a lot of your verbiage around because of the way it sounds. That is something that I teach, that is something I ask our guys to do as well, because it's so valuable. And he was right. I changed it 9 times out of 10. Now I typically just won't respond for about 30 or 40 minutes, and that tends to work.
If it's emotionally charged
that's
message.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I could go on for an hour with little things like that.
Just even taking that example right there, I love to unpack stuff. So if you unpack that, here's what he did. He probably took a minute because he got emotionally charged. He probably took a minute and didn't run right into your office. It would be my guess.
Correct.
He said, like, let's talk. He printed it out. He put it in front of you. He made you read it. Mm-hmm. So as a manager, it's a great lesson because you learned a lesson and you discovered the learning rather than someone telling you, hey, Fran could have said, hey, this message is too terse. You need to do it this way. That's telling somebody. But a better way is what he did is he had you discover it.
100%. And that's one of many reasons why to this day, if somebody asks who was the greatest mentor in your life, it would be Fran. And then it goes on by, but kind of pushing me and sending me out of my comfort zone and going into the Sandler program. Now, when I was in the Sandler program, it was back when we had CD players in our car. You remember this?
Yes, I do.
So I had the big book of CDs that I listened to all around town. But that was also invaluable. And that was something to me that I was out of my comfort zone a little bit at the time. And I think part of that was lack of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I was so new and young in sales. And even when I was in your program, I want to say I was probably one of the youngest in the classroom at that time. And it was somewhat intimidating to me. But upon exiting the program or graduating, I guess you say, from the program, all of the things, there's so many things that it was fun when I left class because I would pick up on one or two things during that class and immediately practice it the next day in the field with a customer because it was fresh, right? And I saw immediate success with it. And as silly as it sounds, some of the things, like even just you get a customer who you're talking to them and they lean back in their chair and they cross their arms, kind of mimic what they do. And they're maybe a slow talker. So let's slow things down for them to talk at their level, right? Those things you don't think about consciously unless you're taught them.
That's right.
Using those, it created a very comfortable space. And there's so many examples I could go into, but it was fun in retrospect going through it, even though Fran kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. It's invaluable.
It's where the best growth comes from, is when we're slightly out of our comfort.
And his insight and the way he managed, and it was just he's a great mentor. I can't thank him enough.
And that's such an important part, I think, of when we get into leadership and you get into management. That to me is the best reward. You saying a minute ago that he was the greatest mentor in your life, or that phrase. If he were to listen to that, which I'm sure he will, I mean,
no, we're not going to send it to him. He'll get a big head.
He already has a big head. We both know he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I'm joking with him, but the reality is that's the reward for putting up with all the headache of being in management, and particularly sales management, is the reward of being a mentor to somebody and watching somebody grow and develop. That's the fuel in the tank for all the headache that comes with the job.
Right. So that's one thing that I've asked every employee that I've interviewed, because I can say with confidence, Fran was my favorite boss. And by the way, he was tough on me too, right? So there was,
that's part of being a good boss.
That's right. So it wasn't all roses the whole time. We had some hard conversations, and he used his dad voice many times with me, which is totally okay and well deserved. But I ask folks that I interview all the time, who is your favorite boss and why, that you've had in the past? And they'll all tell me a story. And I don't tell them this, but what that does is that gives me fuel and desire and drive. If they're ever asked that question again, I want them to say it was Dan Ford. And here's why. And so that gives me something in the back of my brain to say, you need to take the tools that you've learned through, whether it be Sandler or Fran or other people that have influenced my career, and make sure that you do as good of a job as they did, if not better, so you can better them not only as a person outside of work, but also a good employee, but also as a mentor. I want that because I experienced that, and I know how special it was.
And that question, I think, would also, the question being, tell me about your favorite boss. And you could do the opposite. Tell me about your least favorite boss as well. It's giving you insight in terms of how they want to be managed. Do they want a mentor? Do they want somebody to give them guidance? Do they want somebody to leave them alone? What is it that they're looking for? Because you could have two employees that are really good employees. You got to manage them differently.
100%.
So, I mean, I love the question because it's giving you great insight.
It's half of my job is managing these folks. I have about 12 people under me that report either directly or indirectly up the chain, and you hit the nail on the head. They're all managed differently, and it's a lot to get to know the different personalities because it doesn't all work it doesn't fit in one box. So that's been challenging, but it's also been rewarding when you finally figure out, okay, this is how this person ticks, and we can do that.
Yeah, no, it makes me think, Dan, there's another element to it too, and that's that not you if you have 10 employees, you have one person, let's say, that is really solid. They know the business. Let's say they're sales, they're crushing their numbers. To me, that person has more leeway than somebody who's, 6 months in and hasn't built up a track record yet. I mean, you got to manage those two people, even though they both may be competent. One of them has earned the right to have more latitude than the other.
Sure.
And I think that's another element that managers need to think about when they manage their team.
That's a great point. It is.
If you treat everybody the same way, that's not really fair.
No, and it doesn't work.
Even though it comes across as fair, well, everyone's being treated the same way. Well, that's not true, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You'll have that new employee that gets all that leeway, and they won't hit their numbers.
Yeah.
You need a little pressure. You need as a salesperson, you want to be comfortably uncomfortable, right?
It's a great Sandler rule.
Sure. You want to be able to compensate them where, they're not going to starve, but you also need to leave them a little hungry to know, man, if I can just get here, I'll be very, very comfortable. And that's a delicate balance, because the better you get in sales, the easier it is to be comfortable, but you still want to make it slightly uncomfortable so they don't get complacent.
Yeah, and the opposite can be true too, and that is that if you put rigor standards in how many calls somebody's going to make and, all of that stuff, and you put that same baseline in place for somebody who's 10, 12, 15 years in the business, that's not going to go over well too.
No.
And then one more layer that I see in this too is that you get people that have been in the business for a long time and they get comfortable. And that happens as well. So, those people need to be pushed, but maybe pushed in different ways. So we're all driving to get out of our comfort zone, or we should be driven to be out of our comfort zone, as that's where the growth comes.
Sure. I don't like, and one of the big things I try to focus on is I can say this about myself because I've learned it after 42 years of life. I am somewhat of a control freak. And I think it's good that I recognize that about myself, because I can work on that in certain areas of my life. Some folks never recognize that about themselves, and it can become a real problem. Knowing that, I've tried to do a good job of hiring the right people to put them in the right seats on the bus to manage the group, right? So I have an installation manager who manages our entire installation group. He feeds back up to me, but I don't necessarily interface with and learn how to manage all the installers. That's his job. And he does a great job of it, by the way. But I try not to micromanage. I've been micromanaged before, and that's a whole different kind of pressure, right? That's a pressure that kind of forces you to want to be successful, or really it kind of makes you feel like you have to be successful because you're always answering to this guy or this girl, and you're never doing good enough, and that's not a good feeling either. So I try to be intentional about not micromanaging, and I've had to work on that and saying, all right, you've hired the right person, let them do their thing, and then if there's an issue and it works its way up to change, we'll talk about it. But I try not to be, it's like I could easily go around my install manager and nose out in the field and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Because I was on the ladder, and I did. It's
good
not
way of saying it.
Yeah, and so but I've put a lot of trust in my install manager. That's his area of expertise. So let him manage, and let him teach, and let him mentor, and just let me watch from afar. And if there's any advice I can give, then I'll do it.
I was sitting in a Sandler management workshop years ago, and one of the leaders said something that just blew me away. And I was a participant in the room at the time. And they said, our goal as a manager is to get our people to become self-sufficient. Mm. And there was something about that phrase, self-sufficient. And it's maybe, Dan, a bit of an aspiration. You're not always going to get everybody at self-sufficiency, but what a great goal, such that they can think for themselves. They can think through a sales situation on their own. We're implementing a tool right now with some clients called a Pursuit Navigator. Basically, it causes a seller to think through what questions that they need to answer in order to secure a deal, or know even whether or not they should be pursuing the deal. Wow. It's teaching people how to think. And that's something that I think as managers and leaders, we can really, we can all do a better job of that, such that they become self-sufficient. So
But yes, I 100% agree with that. I think that's the key from, I could just speaking from my industry, it's having not only, your installation manager be self-sufficient, you want your team to be self-sufficient. I want everyone on the install team to end up eventually being an installation manager. I want everybody that we bring in at Basesix to know that there is a path here for promotion. There is a path. I mean, I tell my install guys all the time when we've done interviews, I say, hey, listen, if you're a lead, let's say you're a lead installer, right? You're leading a team. If you come across something in the field, like if you're working with our programmer and you see him programming the touch panels and all the technology, and that interests you, and you think, man, I'd like to pursue this. I said, you come to me, let's have a conversation about it, and let's see if we can put you on a path to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's what was given to me when they said, yeah, we'll put you in sales, but we want you to become an expert at the install side of it first. I was like, well, there's a path here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do this. And then, and they weren't lying. They gave me the path, and it even extended further than that for me. And I just think it's important that everybody knows, if we hire you as an install tech, that doesn't mean you're going to stay an install tech for the rest of your life. There's a path here that we can put you on, if you'd like.
Dan, I think one of the things I see as managers is they have employees that aren't growing. And they're not being challenged. They're not, to your point about learning programming for a panel. In that example, people have to be challenged with new skills, almost like a merit badge from Scouts, or if you're playing a video game, you level up, right?
Sure,
I mean, I think about that too.
Yeah.
Everybody around you has to be leveling up. And if you find people that are just not doing that, they've got to be pushed, or one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to stagnate or decline, or they're going to leave and go somewhere else because they don't feel as if they're being challenged and pushed.
Sure. I also think there's a third. They could end up bringing others down with them.
Oh man, yeah.
Right. So I've experienced that with some of my with not my techs now, but I've experienced that in the past where we've had a technician, who may be working with this technician, and this technician is very driven, and we know that just from being in meetings. But his behavior on site with this other technician has shown that he can be easily influenced to maybe not so driven, right? And that that's something that we need to be cognizant of as well, is who we're pairing different people with in the field, and making sure that lead technician is always challenging that other person to help them get better and step up.
Let's grow and get smarter.
That's right.
Dan, I know you've been a big fan of Sandler.
Sure.
Any other Sandler principles or tools, concepts that you've put into practice over the years that have helped you get to where you are? And I let me also just congratulate you on the journey, because I remember when you were right into sales.
Sure.
I remember sitting in the room and soaking it all in.
Many moons ago.
That's been probably a decade and some change.
Yeah, it had to be. I was thinking about this morning. It had to be back in 2000, because I started at One Path in 2008. So it had to be 2009 or 10. So
holy cow.
Close to 15 years ago.
15 years.
Yeah, as simple as it sounds, I think a very important thing that I do or did a lot is setting the expectation of a meeting up front with a customer. Some customers are hard to get into, so if you or some organizations are hard to get into and meet with the right people. So if you've identified the right people and you've been able to set a meeting with them and they give you 30 minutes, I think it's important at the very beginning to introduce yourself and restate why you're here. Yeah. We agreed that we were going to talk about these topics, A, B, and C, right? Is that fair? Makes sense?
Indeed.
What we're going to do is we're going to keep it to 30 minutes, because you've been gracious enough to give me 30 minutes, so we're going to keep it to 30 minutes. And setting a tone right then and there that, okay, this guy listened to the problems I'm having with this room or this space or this car, or you name the industry. He's giving it some thought. We're going to cover these 3 topics, and he's going to keep it within the time frame that I've given him. And oftentimes, when you do that, it'll go well over that time frame, because you'll get into a groove and you'll start talking. But it establishes an immediate rapport with that customer, and I say trust, but it takes time to develop trust. But it kind of sets the stage of, I've heard you. I appreciate this
It up
time.
that you're not going to be like everybody else.
Correct.
Because not everybody uses that tool, upfront contract. And
Yes.
I'm with you. I think it's one of the best tools that's out there. There's an expression I saw the other day. I think it was on TikTok or something, but the expression was unset expectations are premeditated resentment.
That's good.
And I love that
Yes.
expression because
Yeah.
because you get mad at people for, well, we had an hour worth of time and they cut me off at 30, or they said that they only had 30. Well, you didn't reset that expectation, and then you get resentment over the fact that they did something.
100%.
Anyway, I love the expression.
It's a good point. And we get that way too. If we have a vendor come in and say, hey, we want to talk to you about a new product, and we say, we'll give you 45 minutes, and they go to an hour, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And then you kind of are like, get out of here.
Yeah. You just broke trust with me.
100%. I'll give you one more example that I use that has been invaluable is uncovering a budget. How often do we get challenged with figuring out, especially as it relates to our industry? You could have a conference room space like this that you have at Sandler, which is beautiful, by the way, but this room could have cost $20,000 or it could have cost $250,000. It just depends on how you want to use it. Well, that's challenging for a young seller when they meet with somebody, because oftentimes what they're going to tell you, and then you give them the quote, they're going to have sticker shock over. They're going to see it. They say, well, I gave you all my hopes and dreams, but this is way more than I thought. Well, now you've wasted their time, and that's another valuable thing. You never want a customer to feel like they've wasted your time. That was a lesson early on, too, that I learned from Sandler is if they do that and they give you back quotes, this is way over budget, you never say, well, you've wasted my time doing this. No, you want to say, well, I feel bad because now I've wasted a lot of your time and going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I kind of bear the brunt of it. I feel like it's my fault. That's a good thing to do. But uncovering the budget is great. And how you do that through Sandler is so simple. But you can tell them, from what you've told me today, and how I understand you want this room to function, this could fall into one of three buckets. It could be kind of a basic room between $10,000 and $25,000. It could be $25,000 to $80,000, or this could be a pretty high-end room at $80,000 to maybe $150,000. Do you have an idea within those three buckets? You don't need to give me an exact number, but it would help us in our engineering team if you could just give us. And typically they'll say it's kind of probably in that middle number.
Yeah, that's
right?
usually pick the middle. I love the way that you remember and recall that from Sandler. It's such a great way to use a range. It's a great tool
because they don't feel the pressure of because they have a number.
They have a number.
They got a number, but they don't want to give it to you because they're afraid there's a sales guy. I've just met him. He's going to bump right up against that number. But if you can get a range, then that's really going to help a salesperson be able to go back to his team and say, hey, let's not over-design this, but we've got between $25,000 and $50,000 or $70,000.
Otherwise, you're doing quote after quote, and you're throwing darts and frustrating everybody.
Right.
It's an inefficient use of time, and eventually, what ends up happening is that people go away. They ghost you at some point because they're tired of playing the game, and you just missed the mark. I think those are great lessons, and I'm glad you brought them up, and I'm glad you shared them.
Sure.
So awesome. Any final thoughts? I loved spending the time with you. I love hearing your journey, man.
Yes, it's been great.
It's been great to do this together.
Thank you for having me in. You got a beautiful space. So, the final thoughts are, if you're a young sales guy or girl out there who has a desire to go from selling shoes that are a couple $100 to being a partial owner of a company, there's a way to get there. It's people who you surround yourself with. It's identifying true leaders in companies and I say this about Rob all the time. He's a guy I'd follow into battle, right? He's going to do the right thing for every single one of his employees, whether it means it costs the company money or not. If it's the right thing to do, he's going to do it. He's going to help mentor you and help you grow. So it's really surrounding yourself with good mentors and good leaders so they can instill those qualities in you, and then you in turn can become a good mentor and a good leader. And that combination we'll get you where you want to go.
And it's funny when you get started and you're the youngest person in the room, but before you know it, you're not.
No, yeah,
and now you're
me.
teaching others. And,
it's been a blessing, and I love doing it. So it's been a great journey.
Awesome. Well, keep up the great work. Keep having fun. Keep using the Sandler tools.
Sure will.
And keep growing that business. You have done amazing things, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
All right.
So, hey, I hope you've gotten a ton of value out of this episode. By far, it's our purpose to help people make money and have fun and have a good time. We're here to help improve your life, to help you make it easier to go sell or to manage your sales team, and ultimately to go build your own sales engine. Don't miss an episode. Best way to go do that is to make sure that you jump out to buildingyoursalesengine.com/follow, where you can link up to all of our latest episodes. For more information about this episode, go to buildingyoursalesengine.com, where you can download show notes, transcripts, and other information, including handouts and snapshots of this and other episodes. If you'd like to connect with us to talk about how we can help you build your sales engine, and you are either located in the state of Georgia or are referred to us by one of our clients or affiliated by one of our clients, please reach out to us at buildingyoursalesengine.com, where you can click there to book some time with us. We can find out how we can be of help with one another. If you're not in either of those two circumstances, please reach out to Sandler.com, where you can find a Sandler office near you. Be well.